Hello and welcome to Season of War. Excited today to be streaming with Carl. Carl, you've recently attended the Bay Area Open GT this past weekend, actually. So very fresh off the plane back from the States. We're going to be talking about your experience at the Bay Area Open. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Want to give a couple of quick shout outs. First off, everyone joining us live or watching this back in the future, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy our content and want to help us make more and continue going, check out our premium membership where you get a bunch of perks and other cool stuff, but you can look into that yourself. Otherwise, I think for now, Carl, want to talk to us? Tell us about the Bay Area Open. Why were you there, for starters? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy couple weeks for myself. We had Slambo 2 weeks earlier and then had the Bay Area Open this past weekend. Unfortunately, my computer kind of kaputted in the time that I was gone, so wasn't able to talk about Slambo, but here I am talking about Bay Area. Bay Area Open was run by Frontline Gaming. It was 48 players, I believe, at the end of drops and all that. Um, so a little bit smaller than Slambo, but still had a great time. It was in San Francisco, right by the airport, so it was kind of a nice trip to just get directly into San Francisco and then just take a small shuttle to the hotel where
Yes.
they were filming it. There was like 200 and something people for 40K, so it was quite. You still had the feel of a large event
Larger
because of
event.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it was exciting. I never been to California, so I just decided
Really?
to just, you know, take a trip down. I had a lot of air miles, so there
Nice.
we are.
Good mid-sized GT. Nothing too crazy
Mhm,
though.
mhm.
But yeah, a new meta, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing. There was loads of people I've never interacted with, have seen or heard from on Twitter or on social media, who have been doing well in this game, um, but have never played or have never seen played. So it's very interesting seeing those people, knowing who they are, and actually finally talking to them in the end.
Well, nice. I
Mhm.
guess for starters, we can talk about what army and list you brought down, which was a bit of a mix-up, as from Carl of late.
Yeah, I did. I did surprise everybody. I think on the when we were at the airport back from Slambo, I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna stop by your house and pick up 5 Death Riders from
Yeah,
you." And you're like, "Why?" I'm like, "Oh, because I'm going to the Bay Area and I'm gonna play OBR." You're like, "You madman! You haven't played that army in
I know.
2 years or 3 years or something."
Ah,
So I ended up deciding to take OBR. Not only because I like how the army looks. I had my personal OBR army is painted by a good friend of mine, Thomas, and he did a very, very good job. So I wanted to take them out again. It wasn't like a super duper large GT. So, I went down there. You guys weren't there, so I was there to aiming to have fun and,
you're allowed to have
try to do
fun
my
when we're
best.
not there, because when we're
Correct,
all there as a
correct.
team, we all get too competitive with each other.
Exactly, exactly. And the other thing was it wasn't all fun and games with OBR in terms of my choice to take them. I did take them because I had a little bit of a meta call because I knew that the new Night Haunt book and the new Daughters of Cain book were legal for that event. So I was anticipating a lot of people taking those two specific armies because they're new, shiny, and a lot of people already have established armies in those two in those two areas. So I was anticipating a lot more of them than what we saw in the end. Yeah, there we are.
Working, building
Um,
my first of two gladiators.
two, take three. Um, but yeah, so I think or thought that OBR had a good matchup against those two armies with the recursion, re-rolling saves um against Doc and reducing your rent by one meant that they're very, very tanky, -1 to hit from Catacross, that sort of thing. And same with Night Hunt. I thought that their recursion and grinding gameplay was going to be a lot, was an advantage against that army. So I ended up taking a Petrifex Elite army, which isn't surprising. I took Catacross and Arcan. 30 more Tech Guard in one block. 20 more Tech Guard.
Do we lose a Carl? We lost the Carl. All right, well, we got his list. Oh, we're back.
Oh, I'm back.
Okay.
So I don't know where we left off, but I took
30 more
30 more
tech,
tech,
yeah.
20 more tech, 5 Death Riders, a Gothazar Harvester, and Soul Snare Shackles. Soul Snare Shackles was kind of, I wasn't quite sure what to take for an endless spell, whether I should go for a triumph, that sort of thing. I thought that, I would perhaps struggle with Gargants or, some of those other armies that can outbody me and have massive amounts of Ren. And so I just took Soul Snare Shackles with comboing it with the Full Tide Nexus. You could -1 to casting, unbinding, and dispelling. So it would be a 9 to dispel these shackles, and a 9's really, really difficult for you to get off. So
Oh, for sure.
that was kind of my thought process on that. So that was
Sure.
my army.
Sounds like you played assistant ref down there,
I
round 3.
did.
Yeah,
I
nice.
did.
Yeah, sweet. That's a fun thing. Obviously, with the channel, we're grateful to know people or meet people or talk in the Discord with people from all over. So it's fun, going to different areas. Like when we went to Texas, and I'm sure same in California, of meeting different people that we talk to online and in our Discord. So fun to see everyone in person.
Yeah, for sure. It was a lot of people coming up to me and and knowing who I was, but not knowing who they were, which is always odd, but it's always appreciated for people to come up and kind of interact with us and again start to put faces and names to the people who we interact with either on social media or on our Discord. So yeah, it was a fun time.
Nice. Well, so OBR obviously big mix up from Nerdle. Not quite the same. I know you were mentioning not quite the same level or caliber of army.
Yep. Yeah, it's strange because when you think of OBR, you think of recursion, bringing back models. What I have been playing Maggotkin in a while. For all of those of you who was like, if this is supposed to be the year of Maggotkin for Carl, and now he's jumping around again, he's back to his old ways. I have been playing them for.
Oh well, this is connected. All right. Well, hopefully you guys can still hear me. We'll try to get this back online.
Oh,
all right. I'm not sure
apparently
if
we're having
this,
technical
this
issues.
Maybe a Jordan issue, not a Carl issue. Who knows?
Yeah. But yes, so kind of the difference between, like, I thought that OBR was going to be a lot more uh tanky, a lot more resilient than I thought it were. The 5-up ward really is what makes Maggotkin over the top. And so not having that, having a 6-up ward, you kind of like look at it and we're like 6-up, 5-up, that's not really a big difference, but that's 100% difference between the two. And that's kind of where Maggotkin's strengths lie, and not having that, not being able to rely on that was scary at times. And so OBR is a lot more dependent on priority roles than Maggotkin is, I would say, on the whole. So
Sure.
there was a little bit of a learning curve. And yeah.
Nice. Well, yes, with that, obviously talking about the army lots, and we'll get into the games now. Round 1, what you paired into, if I got all this information correctly, Soulblight.
Soulblight, that's correct. So the tournament was run pretty standard. It was wins loss as your first thing. I feel like we have to always talk about this now. And then the first tiebreaker was battle points.
Pretty standard.
Pretty standard, that's right. The nice thing was all 5 of the battle plans that they chose were like fairly
balanced.
Even. Yeah, even in terms of scoring, there was no
savage gains,
or Veins of Gur, which could, you can score
hugely.
a 15-point primary at the very end.
I was literally going to ask you about the missions, because that's the biggest thing with with victory points as the tiebreaker. Like battle points, if you do like a battle point system, that's sometimes that can balance the missions and you can play
Yep.
more missions. But when
Yep.
you do pure victory points,
It
missions
can
can
get
definitely
wild.
get wild. Yeah.
Just like Ridge and Anthony went to Motor City GT a couple weeks back, and the first uh, battle plan was Savage Gains. And I think at the end of the tournament, they scored like 140 points at the very end, something along those lines. But their very first game out of those 5 games was 59 points,
Yeah, that's
like
like
59 of
yeah,
140 in one
almost
battle
half
plan
of it. Yeah.
is crazy. So yeah, I matched up against Adam Heichel, who was running Soul Blight Gravelords. If I say your name wrong, I am so sorry. You've met me already. You know how I have trouble with people's last names, especially. So Adam was running Soul Blight, and he was running 120 zombies. So
Nice.
I fly in. I'm a little bit jet lagged. I forgot my movement trays, so I'm sitting there with
Oh.
50 50 more tech guard, and he's sitting over there with 120. Good thing he had his movement trays, because we would have never gotten through our game. And we're playing First Blood, which is fairly standard for all tournaments because it has the word first in it, so it has to be the first battle plan. Um, and so I was kind of unsure on how to approach the game. I was 6 drops, he was quite a bit more than that. So I ended up taking first and then just pushing my 30 block onto the center point, 20 block onto one of the outer points, and then the Cathalos into the other one. Just so that he needed to deal with all 3 objectives. And he ended up deep striking 2 of his 120 zombie, or the 40 blocks of zombies. He only had 140 block on the board. So it's an interesting tactic.
Hmm.
Because First Blood, you're so far away, the zombies aren't that quick. You can only auto run 6-1, and so it would take him multiple turns to get into the middle, and so he deep struck them. So I tried to zone out the grave sites as best as I can. But he was fairly smart in his positioning. He measured out my maximum threat, and he could drop his zombies regardless of, even if I auto ran 6 most of my things. And so yeah, turn 1, he deep struck the zombies, didn't get 9-inch charges. I scored big, he did not. Going to round 2, basically he pushed all his zombies into my Mortec guard, and this was kind of the big test for the army. I'm like, is good saves and you know high quality attacks better than bodies and bodies and bodies
Yeah.
with no save? So it was kind of, I wasn't quite sure how the fight was going to shake down. But I had Katakros sitting behind my 30
Big
block,
recursion.
so yeah, so I was actually just giving my Mortec guard +1 to attack. So there were 3 attacks apiece, like over and over and over. And it
It's a
was
lawnmower into zombies.
exactly. But then he kept killing Mortec guards. So on a 2+, he would bring back one zombie for every one he killed. And Arcan was kind of the MVP in that game because he was able to give the Mortec guard 5-up ward against mortals. And then drain vitality, so he had to reroll his save rolls of 6. So even when he had all out defense, he would just reroll all the 6s. So all the things that I was doing was going straight through.
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, I had a huge amount of um, advantage in terms of that. Manfred and Radikar were stuck with a 20 Mortec guard basically for 3 turns, and they ended up wiping that unit. But at that point, they've already done their job holding up, you know, 700 points worth of models for just 20 of them
Yeah.
over 3 turns. And then we weren't fast enough, and they did end up crashing onto the 30 Mortec guard in the middle, but 2 turns against 30 Mortec guard isn't gonna happen.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be able to chew through that. So it ended up being 30-19 for myself. So I was feeling good in terms of OBR. Didn't really cast Soul Snare Shackles, so I was like, I didn't needed that 65 points.
Interesting. Well, good start. And I'm guessing you didn't get much practice in with the army beforehand.
Uh, the last game I played with OBR was on the channel whenever
Okay.
that
Yeah.
was.
So like
No TTS
3 months
games, no.
ago, like 2 months ago at least.
Yeah. Yeah, so quite some time ago with OBR. Yeah, quite some.
So a
Yeah,
good start for trying to refamiliarize yourself with an army.
yeah, yeah. The thing with OBR though, it's nice. It plays so different. You do miss your all out attacks, your all out defense. Your redeploys is the big one where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna sit right here, and then when he comes in closer, redeploy. You're like, oh wait, I can't redeploy. Um, but it is very nice to be able to reroll
Yeah,
your saves for all your Mortec,
there are some
increase
great
their movement
abilities
by
in there.
3, correct.
Yeah,
There I people are like, "Oh, OBR is slow." They're not really slow. You have so much
plus
relentless
three
discipline.
movement, plus one to run.
Exactly. Exactly. You have so much with Catacross, especially when you take him. You generate so many that you can just you can just pick and choose whatever you want. The one that really hurts is the reroll charges. And of course you can get that if you go for the Triumph of Bloodthirsty.
Yeah,
Um so you can counteract some of the weaknesses of the army with your list construction.
sure.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, and yeah, so feeling good going into round 2. So I think we'll just power through ahead.
Yeah.
Um, I ended up playing Gareth Thomas with his corn with an incarnate. So he was running Scarbrand, 2 Bloodthirsters, incarnate, and like very, very minimum like dogs. Um, so this I've played against the incarnate and with incarnate a few times. It's a very, very strange model that warps the game around itself because it's unkillable like Marathi is. You can just throw that thing in, and because you can't retreat away from it,
It ties you
it
up.
it could just be the perfect pinning piece. And me having only 6 units in my army, one of them being a huge 30-man block. If he tags in a corner of that 30-man block, he could potentially hold that up for a couple turns. Because my pile and my attack, if I don't do enough damage to it, it's just gonna ignore the
Yeah.
damage, the plinking damage that I usually do. And so I went into it thinking that I needed to deal with the incarnate first and foremost, and then use my tankiness to hold up the bloodthirsters, and then finally just grind through them. So with that in mind, I ended up at the very, very start giving him turn because he couldn't get into me. He threw his incarnate right into the middle of the board.
What was the
Uh,
mission
we're
for this?
we're yeah, sorry. We're playing power struggle. So again, my game plan was just the triangle, the 2 objectives that's on my zone, and then just contest for for the middle one.
Yeah.
No need to contest his. And I think Gareth had the same kind of idea. So he threw his incarnate just right onto the center point to to stop me. Um and so on my turn, I ended up doing Curse of Years. It did 14 mortal wounds
To what?
to the incarnate.
Nice.
So I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't touch the incarnate now. It's probably gonna go down a level. And then me being an idiot, I'm like, no, no, no. What if he rolls a 15, a 16, a 17, or an 18? So I threw in the Death Riders and ended up doing 18 wounds to it. So the incarnate went down a level. He killed 2 Death Riders, which is
Okay.
okay.
You did.
Um,
I would make the same play of wanting to guarantee the incarnate goes down because
correct.
if he
Yeah.
does roll high, that could be game breaking.
Yeah, like, then it's an extra turn that
Yeah.
I would have to
Yeah.
deal with it.
More
So
game
I
breaking than the Death Riders getting killed.
dying, yeah. And so I ended up winning the double, and this was where I think my mistake happened. Because I had all these theories about OBR in my head, but no actual practice with it for such a long time, I ended up taking the double. Whereas I should have probably given Gareth the double because his bloodthirsters were quite far back, and they weren't going to impact me at all. Yes, the incarnate would have killed the Death Riders, but then on my turn I would kill it. But I ended up throwing like all my tanky pieces forward, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hold here, kill the incarnate, and I positioned Catacross sorta in front of my Mortec guard unit, my 30 Mortec guard. I'm thinking that he was gonna it was too juicy a target for him not to throw Scarbrand into Catacross. and I did some quick maths in my head. I'm like, maybe Catacross lives, and if Catacross lives against Scarbrand and he's severely wounded, he's gonna really just hurt hurt Scarbrand and potentially even kill him because Scarbrand's only a 4 up save on 13 wounds. Yeah. Here he is on the chat. Yeah, he did distract me long enough. And then basically that gambit didn't work. Bring Scarbrand ended up killing Kakarros, and at that point I didn't have a -1 to hit. Didn't have RDP, and then the army starts to fall apart um quite severely once some of those buff pieces go away. Um Doubled me from 2 to 3, and then after his double turn, I had 20 more tech left. Scarbrand does a number on the Mortec guard. Fighting twice, 2 up, 8 mortal wounds,
The
16 mortal
mortals, yeah,
wounds.
yeah.
Just and then the affectionately called the Boom Thirster. He Gareth actually positioned it quite well, so I hit the harvester all the time because that's the only thing that prevents or like has protection against mortal wounds, or for my Mortec guard, I mean, is the 4 up bring back. But because the 4 mortal wounds were occurring with an 8 of it, he was hitting the Gothazar, and that thing only has 10 wounds, so it
Goes
ended up
down quick.
popping. So yeah, Gareth really we were finished quite early.
No
Um
surprise for you.
no surprise for me.
You're always quick.
Um But yeah, which meant I had a long lunch. Gareth beat me 32 to 14, so it was quite a trouncing. I'm like, ooh, could have played that probably a little bit smarter. Could have ignored the incarnate. Because of Kakarros having a -1 to hit, I could have just -1 to hit the incarnate. And yes, he's gonna pin me near the center, but you know, I should have played the long game of 3, 4, 5 instead of 1, 2, 3. Um, And so, yeah, ended up killing the incarnate early, but that was the wrong choice. I should have chosen some of the other things to do so. So yeah, I was 1-1 going into lunch. I had pizza. I had a big pizza.
This is
Uh,
the real report we want. Is the lunch report.
I actually never ate at the hotel because it was really expensive and people kept telling me not to do it. So I ended up just walking around and getting random stuff, um, basically everywhere. So yeah, I had a big pizza, which became my breakfast for day 2 and my breakfast before I flew out on Monday. So it was pretty good. Shout out to
Must
the
have
pizza
been.
guys. And so yeah, I kind of was. I felt really good after round 1, then didn't feel as great in round 2. So I was like even keeled going into round 3. I'm like, okay, I'm not as tanky as I initially thought in prior to the tournament starting, but I am really tanky as well. So what toppings? It was pepperoni, sausage. It had onions in it for some reason, and green peppers.
Run with
Um,
onions.
and it was like they gave you uh, tubs of like Parmesan cheese. So I was telling people in the chat, I'm lactose intolerant. I should not have cheese, but I sprinkled that thing all over
Of
the
course you did.
the pizza. I always do. So round 3, I played the only assistant ref in the chat,
Yep.
Andrew Wood, and he was playing a very interesting Phoenicium list. I don't know if you saw it.
I have it up here. I
Yeah,
didn't look at it too closely, but this was also his first GT.
yeah,
Um,
and he said that we had helped him, gain enough confidence to play in GTS, and if anything, at the end of the day, that's kind of what I want
that's
to hear,
yeah,
and
that's the coolest
want to
thing.
bring people into it.
It's why we
Uh,
started the channel, wanting to showcase the competitive scene, make it more inviting, help people prep for it, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I there was quite a few people whose first GTs it was. Um and the comment that I got, or like the question I got, is like, how do you play 5 games without being tired? I'm like, you don't play 5 games without being tired. You're always tired. But GT fatigue is real, and GT endurance is part of the experience, and eventually winning. When you have enough reps with your army where you're not exhausted from just remembering your rules and that sort of thing, and being able to transfer that to basically be automatic when you play is kind of like my advice for people who are starting to play GTs, because it is a different beast. Yeah, it was a Phoenicium list with two Phoenixes, the Eidolon of Mathland
I
aspect
saw
of the
that.
sea
Yep.
as his ally because of the -1 to your save, D3 times, can be potentially impactful. His Phoenix Guard have loads of attacks but are only -1 rend, so you can't deal with things that have high armor saves uh, and can reroll saves, like my army. And then a whole bunch of assassins. So this was famously done by a gentleman from LVO. His name escapes me. He made it to the top 8 when I was at LVO. And basically the play is to use the Shadow Warriors and the Phoenix Guard to hold objectives. And when your opponent jumps onto any one of those objectives, if they only outnumber you by a few models, you throw the assassins
Yep.
from those units
Pop them out.
to increase your model count, which is very interesting. And it was actually very, very impactful in our game. It was a crazy back and forth game of me trying to do battle tactics like broken ranks. I'm like, I have 30 more tech, Arcan, and a Gothisar Harvester. That's gonna kill 10 Phoenix Guard. Not being able to kill 10 Phoenix Guard,
Oh,
just because of that 4-up ward. Um, and yeah, we just grinded. And Andrew was saying that he was unsure how to approach the game against my army because I had a lot more bodies. Uh, and that was kind of the deciding factor, I think, at the very end of the day, is me being very tanky, him being very tanky,
both
but
resilient.
me,
Yeah.
that's correct, but me having more bodies at most times. Um,
How
it
did,
did. Yeah, sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just saying, how did the Eidolon of the Sea perform?
He didn't cast the spell once.
Oh god.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had Arcan, who's +2 to unbind, and then I kept using the Bone Type Nexus to -1 to cast him because I was so afraid of that spell.
Yeah.
Once he gets it
Makes
off and
sense.
he rolls a 2 or 3, the Mortec Guard on 0-up save is just gonna melt, right?
Love the Eidolon of the Sea in theory, but in practice, it's just like, even with the reroll, considering that obviously most armies have unbinds, even just at base no pluses, just
Yeah,
not reliable enough. It's like
yeah,
brings a lot of value other than just that spell, but that's the main reason you take it, right?
yeah, and he's not super duper punchy either. Um, but my unbinding rolls were great,
And
as well
Arcane's
as the
at
plus
plus
2.
two. Yeah.
Plus the -1 to cast meant that it was very, very difficult for Andrew to get that spell off. And that was actually very impactful because the Phoenixes get +1 to their save when a friendly
Yep. That's
thing casts. So he was using that as a buff piece to his Phoenixes. His one Phoenix had Arcane Tome as well. But without a reroll, it's not reliable, wholly reliable. So he was using the Eidolon to buff up his Phoenixes indirectly by debuffing your opponent. So it was kind of like a lot of things hinged upon the Eidolon being able to cast stuff. Um, yeah. Yeah, the final turn was crazy. We were kind of heading down close to the end of time, and Andrew and I were kind of trying to finish all 5 rounds. Uh, and on my turn 5, I ended up killing both Phoenixes, which was his grand strategy of Beastmaster. Now, Andrew had told me that prior to the game that sometimes when his Phoenixes have died, that he would cast Metamorphosis on the Eidolon to get his Beastmaster at the end because it's a monster from your starting army. Um, and I don't think it ends into your next hero phase. And since the game has finished and your next hero phase doesn't start, he's still counted as a monster. So I was very, very aware of that. I was like, I have to deny him his grand strategy to beat him and on all these things.
really,
Um,
that's a cool little trick. I like that.
yeah, it is. It is very. He's identified. This was his first GT, so it was very impressive that he's identified like
That
this
little
small
workaround.
interaction. Yeah. So his Flame Phoenix died, and so this was the first gamble that I had. If he rolls a 4-up, I lose. If he gets his grand strategy, it's over for me. I can't beat Andrew. The best I could do is tie. He rolls a 3. I'm like, yes, the Phoenix is dead. Now I have to stop him from casting Metamorphosis so that I deny his grand strategy. I thought that I had sealed the game once I unbound Metamorphosis from the Eidolon. He chose Bring It Down, and I had left Arcane kind of a little bit in the wind. And so Andrew just jumped like the rest of his remaining army on Arcan. There's like 2 assassins, 10 Phoenix Guard, 10 Shadow Warriors, and the Eidolon onto Arcan, and he just threw everything and left him on 1 wound. And he's like, I Carled! And I'm like, yeah, you did. Because if you brought it down with a monster, or brought it down, killed a monster, that would have been 3 points. And so the final score was 21-18. So those 3 points and that
it.
1 wound
Yeah.
was it. Yeah.
It's 1 wound. So you make me break games. It was
incredibly close. Yeah. Or rolling up the 4-up for the Phoenix to come back meant that I didn't have enough to kill him again, which meant we would have tied. So yeah, I just narrowly squeaked it by from Andrew, and
I
he
feel
played
your pain,
incredibly
Andrew.
well.
That was me at Slambo. I was in your shoes, so I feel your pain.
Yeah. There was it was funny because turn 2 or turn 3, I see him in the chat. He went into Arcan, and he did do enough wounds to leave him on 1. Subsequently over the turns, Arcan did heal quite a bit. And moved around with his 19-inch move. If he had killed Arcan there, then he wouldn't have the opportunity to potentially get Arcan in turn 5. So leaving things on 1 wound's not the worst thing in the world sometimes, but it can be the worst thing in the world at others.
It's great if you can then finish it off the next turn or something, but the fact that you're able to heal up so fast with OBR healing 6 wounds a turn.
Yeah.
That's then you have to fully kill something again. It's not just like a heroic recovery bringing him to 4 wounds, and you can still comfortably kill it the next turn.
Yeah. So I was heroic recovering him too, so it's 6 plus D3 every turn, and then at that point he's 11 wounds. He's gonna get.
You're healing him up in a turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up day 1 with 2 and 1. I was kind of kicking myself with how I played against Gareth. Not having shooting is so hard. It's so difficult to deal with Incarnate because you have to throw your attacking pieces into it to try to kill it. But I think you just ignore it for the most part and dismantle the rest of the army.
It's not the biggest damage threat there is.
Yeah. And me only having Arcan and the Gothazar Harvester as my only monsters, it also meant I couldn't put the Soul Snare Shackles down to prevent him charging, but Corn gets around that pretty easily anyways, with a 6-inch pile and Bloodthirster. But yeah, that Incarnate, it just warps games. I don't know how I feel about it kind of existing within the meta. It does help some armies, but it's sometimes it's like you roll a 17 and 18 and your opponent did 15 damage. And that 15 damage has been wiped out, which is just super swingy.
It can, and like you said, it's most impactful but against armies that have to engage it to get that damage.
Yeah.
And then no matter what, you're sacrificing a unit potentially, at least that round, because it doesn't die until the end of the round, end of the turn or whatever. Or drop a stage.
Yeah, it doesn't drop. So it still attacks at its most efficient, even the turn that you dealt that much damage. So
I'm excited to build up my own Incarnate for the channel.
I've been looking at the Incarnate as well. It's not like I wouldn't use it. I'm not an elitist. I'm gonna use every single tool in my repertoire to win games and win tournaments. So for those of you that are taking the Incarnate, I'm not trying to shame you. It's just a weird thing. It's
something now like dragons in any order army. You just have to be prepared. You can see it in any list, right? And like you said, well, that's the great thing about working on building one up for the channel is we'll get to play and practice against it a little more. So.
Yep. And also it's not it's very strange in when it dies and slain and destroyed. There's like small nuances with it. So I would like GW to answer some of those nagging questions. Uh Bay Area had its own FAQ in regards to the incarnate. That was an interesting take on it as well, where it's like if you kill the bonded hero, since that incarnate is an enemy model to most of your models, it doesn't count for capping objectives for your end. But there's arguments on the other end as well because it's still part of your army. Um, so there's questions and things that are still lingering from the incarnate, but we'll move on because that was the only incarnate I played. So yeah, end of Saturday, I ended up hanging out with one of our premium members, the one and only Sleepy Gary, whose
Nice.
name is not Sleepy or Gary, it's Dylan. And he was riding high at 3-0. And so we
Nice.
just
Was he
went to
playing
Sons of
Sons
Bama.
of Sons of?
Yeah, with
That's who he
Craig
played
Notes.
at LVO too.
Yeah.
Completed
Um,
his list.
yes. So yeah, I was hanging out with Sleepy Gary, and because it was a true Swiss, we knew who we were facing going into round four. And I was facing Maggotkin of Nurgle, my old friend army. Um, Nicholas Turpin, that was also his first GT. So I played two
Oh, nice.
back-to-back first GT players. He had an interesting list: Bellacore, Bloab, and Orgoth.
Oh yeah, I saw there were some of the big juicy guys.
Yeah, not as many flies, only four. And then 2 units of two beasts, which was interesting as well. Usually those are run singular. Um, And so I was very, very aware of how to play against the army. He did not have rancid visitations, which is the one spell that could potentially just mow down all my Mortec. And so because he didn't have the bodies, I played a hold playstyle, grind playstyle. We were playing on tectonic interference, so the objectives were quite close to each other, quite central, and it also meant that my Mortec can just support each other. And so that's what I ended up doing. Uh I I hate playing against Nurgle. The 5-up board just messes with math so
Yeah, they're
much.
tough. They're tough.
It's like, oh, I'm gonna do Slay the Warlord. No, I'm not gonna do Slay the Warlord because that 4-up board.
Could really
I had
spike.
flashbacks. I got
Exactly.
flashbacks with Andrew, so I was like, just gonna do other things. Um, we were relatively even until we got to about the third round. Um, when I was able to get into Belcore. Basically, he was killing the 30 Mortec, but I was bringing them back closer to Belcore, and I was able to just lock him in and just throw as much heat into Belcore as possible. Um, and being prime hunters, killing a monster, doing it, bring it down on a priority target is crazy. So
Ooh,
I ended up scoring 9 points on that turn. We were like 9 to 8 going into round three, and I just scored 9 immediately in round three and by itself. And so that meant that Nicholas had to be very aggressive to try to get back the points. But he just didn't have enough bodies. He ended up killing the Death Riders, killing the 20 Mortec, but 30 Mortec requires almost your whole entire army to deal with if you don't have like a horde killing spell at your disposal. And so I ended up beating him 36 to 19. 36 points is a lot of points. And I was feeling good. I was like, okay, now I can make a run deeper into the 4-1s because I knew based on the number of players that there was only going to be one undefeated player and I could potentially throw myself closer to the podium. There was no way I can get to the podium based on the points. The Sons of Behemoth players. There's a
yes, they
gentleman named
do.
Bear. Yeah, and Sleepy Gary were both, I think, like 40 points ahead, 30 or 40 points ahead of me, and there was no way I was going to catch up to them, even if they lose. They had a mirror match. round 4. Exact same lists, exact same regiments. Everything was exactly the same. And Sleepy Gary did end up losing by 1 point there. So
It's rough.
uh, yeah, I think it was just down to die rolls. It's like
Oh,
two
it's
players of
hugely at that part. Yeah.
equal skill, equal lists, like on tectonic interference. Is
Yeah.
yeah. And so yeah, 3-1 going into round 5. Round 5, kind of I was, for those of you who are newer to GTs and newer to tournaments, always read your pack. I knew that Feral Foray was round 5. The army the OBR army I took only has 6 units, and three of those units can't really act independently of each other in Arcan, Karakros, and the Gothazar Harvester. So I only basically had 3 scoring slash pushing pieces
Yeah.
in my army. So I identified Feral Foray as the one mission that I'm at a severe disadvantage in. And so I ended up playing Robert Woods, who's from Double Turn Panic. He's a teammate of Adam Heichel, who I played in round 1. And he had a very interesting big wall list that consisted of 3 units of 10 Art Boys, 2 units of Pigs, a Mega Boss and Maw Crusher, which is fairly standard,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of War Chanters, of course, which wasn't a surprise, and then the all scary, all powerful Wargog Prophet.
Yeah.
You could just laser anything off the board, with a 4-up ward as well. So yeah, so I wasn't quite sure how to play this, because he had a lot more scoring units. Do I sit on my 3 objectives, just go battle tactic for battle tactic, and then round 5 throw Arcan because he's so fast into one of my opponent's points, and then try to steal like a 1 or 2 point victory that way? I knew I had to keep my Mortek Guard away from the Wargork Prophet, because that thing can
Yeah.
just, if he rolls hot, just laser them off the board.
Decimate them. Yep.
And so we played very cagey. Um, you know, he was slowly shifting to one side, I was slowly shifting to the other, and we were playing very cagey. And in turn 2, he I end up getting Curse of Years off again and dead 16 mortal wounds to 10 Ard Boys.
Nice.
So there was only 3 Ard Boys, I believe, left on one of the side objectives, and I saw that as the opportunity for me to burn one of his objectives, steal one of his objectives, and put him on the back foot. Now, I was slowly moving my 20 Mortek Guard up, and my 30 Mortek Guard was just touching the edge of my point. So at any point, I can launch them forward and then attack my opponent. So this was the opportunity. Won the prio, launched my 20 Mortek Guard unit onto the Ard Boys, end up taking the point. Now, my mistake was I threw Arcan that way as well, just to guarantee that I take the point, but there was no point in me doing that. And so I had Arcan and 20 Mortek Guard just on that one point. I didn't measure, I was too excited, and basically I left my 20 Mortek Guard unit within 12 of his Wargog Prophet.
Oh no.
And so the laser started, and I think he took out 15 Mortek Guard just from the laser. He ended up blowing up himself, which meant that my 30 Mortek Guard unit was free to operate at that point. He threw his Maw Crusher in, and he took Broken Ranks. And I wasn't sure if 3 pigs could kill 5 Mortek. Like it was quite a gamble for him. He attacked the Mortek, ended up killing him, getting his battle tactic. Then the Mega Boss was free to just absolutely smash Arcan. So I lost 2 pieces taking that objective. In the end, I think it was the correct play, but I didn't need to throw Arcan so deep as well. If I put him off to the side and not charged, then the Mega Boss wouldn't have been able to get in. But that meant I only had my 30 Mortek Guard unit, Karakros, the Death Riders, and the Gothazar Harvester. So I wasn't going to be able to attack his points without being able to defend, because he had the ability to teleport if I left any of my objectives, he would just quickly teleport, like, I don't know, War
Yeah.
Chanter. It doesn't even have to be like a big piece. Um, and basically, round 3, I had 1 priority. I gave him priority, and then I burned one of my objectives just to prevent him from scoring that 1 extra point. I didn't have enough bodies and units to hold all 3, so I knew he was coming for me. So I burned one of my own. And Robert, um, because of Kakarot stealing CPs, Robert wasn't keeping track, or lost track of his CPs. He threw his Maw Crusher into my 30 Mortek Guard. And he was gonna all out defense him and the pigs that were beside it. And he went to go reach for a CP, and he did not have any CPs left because I kept stealing them. And he's like, "Uh-oh, I can't even all out attack, so I can't even like kill the Mortek Guard." He ended up attacking Catacross instead of the Mortek Guard because he knew, because I was strung out, that I was
Yeah.
gonna remove the ones on one side and then bring them back closer to his Maw Crusher. He attacked Catacross, hitting him 13 wounds, and
Oh.
Kakarot was all juiced up. And so between Kakarot, the 30 Mortek Guard, I was able to kill his Maw Crusher on his turn 3, kill his 3 pigs, and I was kind of in the driver's seat at that point. There was nothing in his army that could deal with 30 Mortek. And so on my turn 3, I pushed him up, and then I charged, and then I tailed them all the way over so that they were touching his point that was his non-central point. Ended up burning it because I chose that unit to control that
Yeah.
objective instead of the middle one. And I still had the block of like 20-ish more tech on his central point. And so at that point, he had been aggressively moving with pigs towards my side objective. And so it was basically, can the pigs take that side of objective, then jump into the center, kill either the harvester or Kakarot to take my middle. They weren't able to, and he wasn't able to fight out of the 30 Mortek Guard unit up top. They ended up only having like 3 or 4 left by the end of the game over the course of 2 turns because Iron Jaws has some
Yeah,
punch.
smash.
Yeah, are able to. So I ended up winning 29-19 against Robert. Robert was a great opponent. Um, we had a super fun game. He kept chirping me because I kept measuring 12 and putting dice down all over the Wargok Prophet. And he's like, why are you scared of the Wargok Prophet? I'm like, I know what it does. Don't
Yeah.
don't try to bait me in. Because I moved my Mortek guard up, realized I was 12. I won the double, and then I just moved them backwards, like very slightly,
Yeah.
so that they weren't within 12. So it was a very, very strange game in that I thought I was at a severe disadvantage, but I was able to play well, and Kakarot stealing CPs was what won me the game. He wasn't able to Mighty Destroyers effectively at any time. If he did Mighty Destroyers, he wouldn't have all out attack or all out
Yeah.
defense or redeploy. He was operating on 1 CP basically all game because his 4-ups weren't going off either to get CPs. So he was only operating with 1. Um,
Oops.
yeah, and so Kakarot was MVP. He's good. Arcan, I'm not so sure about, but his speed is the only thing, and teleporting is the only thing that you have.
The unbinds can be so big in some games.
Yeah, yep. Against Andrew, if I didn't have Arcan, I would have, my Mortek Guard units would have melted. Yeah, he's more of a buff piece than a combat piece. I wish he wasn't a monster, but that's I did like the first turn of every single one of my games. It was Ferocious Advance with Kakarot, Gothazar Harvester, and Arcan. Arcan would cast Metamorphosis on Kakarot and then run 3. And if my opponent doesn't have 3 monsters, I put them on the back foot 1 point,
Yep.
which meant they would have to come into my castle, which is what I want my opponents to do.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it's big.
so yeah, 4-1 with OBR. My thoughts on the army: very tanky, very resilient, but requires a lot of support to accomplish that tankiness. The 30 Mortek Guard unit, I would probably drop down to a 20 Mortek Guard unit. There's almost no instance where 30 Mortek Guard was better than 30. It was just easier for my opponent to tag it on edges and stuff. I would go 20 then 10. Because 20 Mortek Guard unit with Gothazar Harvester is already very, very tanky. It already accomplishes what you want.
There's
Um,
something that is really
and
scary.
I
You
was
can
finding
screen
turn
with
four,
those
turn 5
10.
that I didn't. Oh, I think
Sorry.
you're muted,
Oh, what? How
or
am
I
I
can't hear
muted?
you at least. Wait.
I am not sure. Hopefully, you
Oh,
guys
that
can
was
still
me.
hear.
My
Okay. Your
my
headset
headphones
went to
just
sleep?
turned.
Yeah.
Yeah, my headset went to sleep. Um, yeah, so I think it's tanky enough with a Gothazar. 20 Mortek Guard without a Harvester is not very tanky. I lost it every single game. People were able to just pick that unit apart. Um, and so I might have to shuffle. I like the list overall in terms of how much bodies it has, what support pieces they have, but in terms of separating the units, I might separate some of the units a little bit more, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's
But
very, very different from Maggotkin. It doesn't have the same resilience, even though you bring back so many models. There's so much damage in the game now that that recursion sometimes doesn't
isn't
happen.
enough.
Yeah, 6 models is a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's 6 wounds that you've brought back to a unit. And OBR is a lot more reliant on the priority roll as well, because the healing only occurs at the start of your hero phase. So you need that. When people double turn you, they're able to smash the units quite easily. So you want the game's flow to be my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. Just so that you have the yeah, you have the recursion to compete with your opponent. Um, I was gonna leave the Bone Tithe Nexus at home because it's a huge terrain piece and I didn't want to travel with it. I'm glad I didn't. Always bring that thing. It's free. Um,
Should have borrowed mine because I have all my pieces magnetized.
yeah, I should have. I was already there. I was already there. I
Yeah.
should have just
It's
borrowed
just,
it.
yeah, it would patch so much smaller
Yeah.
next
And
time.
so and so yeah, I always do the -1 to cast in combination with Arcans +2 to Unbind, meant that you're basically Nagash levels of stopping people's spells. Um, I didn't really use any of the other modes. I maybe did a couple times 1 mortal wound just to guarantee a battle tactic or kill a hero that was on 1 wound. That's um that sort of thing. But yeah, I do enjoy OBR. I might play them in
They're a cool army.
some of the smaller tournaments. I don't know if I would take them to a GT again. Just because it was a lot of work to move that amount of bodies. And to think about where you want to recur your models. And
At least have to
okay,
bring movement trays next time.
yes. And then Karakos's profile is a nightmare.
Oh
Um,
yeah. They gotta
the nice,
simplify like all his like lackeys into one profile and just the
yeah,
number of attacks changes.
yeah,
That's
that would have been
so much
much
easier.
simple. Yeah, so much easier. Yeah, it's like, okay, I have Naderite dueling blades now, and then I have Naderite things now, and
Yeah.
you're rolling like six different times. The nice thing about my Karakros is it's all the figures are magnetized, so I pull them off, so I know what each one has. So I like look at the model, I'm like, okay, this is what my attacks look like right now. But then it's like I have to put them back on and like remove them and put them back on and remove them. It's kind of um is hilarious.
Yeah.
So yeah. I ended up winning best death. I was a couple points ahead of Alexander Gonzalez, who's a very, very good player as well. He was taking his Night Haunt for a spin. Um, and I was 2 or 3 points ahead of him at the end of the day. So it was a very, very close, tight race for best death. Ended up being sixth. Again, some of the other players, Sons of Behemoth, that sort of thing, were scoring quite big.
Hard to compete
Um, yeah, hard to compete
with
with.
victory points.
Looking at the scores at the very end of the day, um, each one of my opponents, barring Gareth, who absolutely just tabled me turn 2, um, my first round opponent was 19 points. My third round opponent was 18. My fourth round opponent was 19, and my fifth round opponent is 19. So it's kind of very telltale in how OBR plays. You can hold your opponent down to about that points level, because you're so tanky. So if you can score more than 20 points, you're in a pretty good spot. And if you can do that round one, round two, round three, so that you have a huge advantage and
off of the lead.
you push your opponent to come to you uh, because of uh, because of your play style. You just try to eke out 1 or 2 point um, victor point advantages, and then your opponent has to do something drastic like take broken ranks because that's the only battle tactic they have, and then they fail it, and then you have an even bigger advantage. So it's a very interesting army, a different play style than what I'm used to. But yeah, I might try them out and play them in some of our small local RTTs. Um, but yeah, I had a great time at BAO. A whole bunch of you came up and said hi to me. Shout out to the Nuge who was playing Beasts of Chaos and had to play Night Haunt multiple times. And yeah,
Yeah, not what they
I had
want.
a great time. Yeah, no, you're oh, you have Rend because of your White Dwarf. You don't have Rend anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah, very successful GT with an not
Underperforming army.
underperforming army. This
Yeah,
the great way to put it because it's not definitely has tools and some strong pieces, but it's not in the grand scheme of the meta. It's not in an amazing spot.
yeah.
What's out there?
Yeah, movement is key in this game, and it's king. And you don't have any teleports. Your things, even though they move 7, isn't the fastest things, and so you have to really plan for where your blocks of Mortec are going to be round 2, round 3. Uh, because if you misplan and you put them off to the side, and an objective gets burned, and they're just sitting in no man's land, yeah, you're gonna lose your games.
Joey has a great question. You mentioned dropping your 30 Mortec down to 20, potentially,
hmm
considering it. What
hmm
else would you change in your list after that? What would you
So
do with those extra points?
yeah, so I would either drop it down so that's 20, 10 more tech.
So same
So
points.
just split it, or I would drop the Soul Snare Shackles because I cast it once the whole tournament.
Yeah.
That's 65 points. Um, 65 points plus the 140 from the more tech, plus the 20 points that I have left over meant that I could maybe fit in a second harvester so that the 220 blocks are both sitting behind harvesters, or I would take a catapult because couldn't reach out and touch um, support heroes. The Wargok Prophet was a huge problem for me. If he didn't blow himself up, I don't know if I can ever approach that 12-inch bubble. But with a catapult, you can just throw stuff at it, and then, or maybe even shoot the special shot that just slays him, so that it bypasses his ward save. So you have more play further out. Even the game against Gareth with the Incarnate, if I just throw it, it's a 4-up save. If I do 10 wounds to it and he rolls, semi-average on his 3d6, it could just kill it without me even engaging onto it. And then I can play a more defensive castle game, so that the opponent comes to me instead of me having to be proactive and, you know, throw it.
That's one of the great things about the catapults, right? They always used to put the pressure on, but
Yeah.
as
All out defense, Mystic Shield, as Santius is saying, it does make it much harder
they're
to
not
play with.
reliable anymore, not as reliable.
Yeah, not as reliable, correct. But it's still a great piece. People have to respect it. 3 up, if you hit 3, is still 1 going through. So it's still going to be 5 damage. Most heroes aren't able to stand that. The special shot is the big one because you can pick out models. I had a game way before where my opponent had 3 Vanguard, and I sniped the middle one and didn't charge it, so that the other, you know,
Another one just
this other
dies.
another one just dies to coherency.
Nice. Well, again, 4-1 was an awesome result with Bone Reapers. Any other final thoughts?
No, I'm excited to play more Age of Sigmar, go to more tournaments. I will be sort of kind of in that area again in about 2 weeks or so, for the US Open San Diego. So
Ooh,
for those of you who are going to be there, you can say hi to me. And
Carl's going everywhere.
yeah, yep, everywhere. I'm the globe trotting person this year at
Well,
least.
still less of a globetrotter than Oliver. but
Yes.
more
Yeah,
events.
Oliver's more events. That's correct.
Well,
Yep.
nice. We also do have some upcoming events in the GTA. I know that, or this month, it's June already. You have a couple RTTs, and I think next weekend, not this coming weekend, the weekend after, we got the Game Night GT down in London, Ontario. So if you're in Ontario or in the area or feel like flying to Canada, come out for the Game Night GT. Excited for it. Carl won't be there.
No, I won't be. It looks like somebody is grudging me. We'll see. We'll see, Tom. We'll see.
Oh, nice. It's not happen. Love to see it. All right. Cool. Well, I think otherwise then, Carl, if there's no other notes, we can say a big thank you to everyone in the chat for joining us live. Thank you to everyone watching this back as well. Again, I hope you enjoy this kind of content mixed in with everything else. Just try to sprinkle some extra stuff on the side, give some good insights, and yeah, just help everybody learn. And whether it's wins or losses, there's always stuff to glean from other people's games. And the more you want to learn and study or pay attention, the better. More you'll learn. So always important. But otherwise, I think we can wrap things up here and say a big good night to everyone, or good afternoon wherever you are.
Or good morning.
Good morning as well. Thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you guys soon in another video.
Bye.